Come onto the field first, your brave Saxon army.
Boo! Boo, Saxons! Boo!
The Saxons!
Boo!
Now, I don't... 66, that was that year where the Normans invaded, wasn't it?
Right, Normans!
But there was a lot to 1066 before the Normans came on. There was? You see, they did in 1066, even before the Normans had their tribe. It's gone. In fact, when Edward the Confessor, King of England, died, there were many claimants to his throne. You know, Normandy. You know Winson. Do you also know of Harald Hardrada, the great Viking? Eh? Exactly. Harald Hardrada was the king of Normandy. King of Normandy? No. King of Norway. And he led a great host across Scandinavia. Please welcome your great Viking host.
Vikings, they're cousins of the Normans, so hooray!
They're all terrible people.
No, they're fine.
They are, fundamentally. When Hardrada invaded, he met the Saxon army, led by the earls Morcar and Edgar, at a place called Fulford, just outside York. Before Harold Godwinson had even been able to muster his army, his two northern earls had assembled theirs.
Yeah.
You can see here, obviously, the Saxons wearing the long Gita-type shields.
Boo, Saxons!
The pointed kite-type shields, famed for the period, as well as the Saxons wearing their famed round shields. Both armies would utilise a similar technique, form up in shield walls. These were very tightly packed formations, essentially presenting an impossible task to any enemy who's trying to get through into the army behind. However, the problem came when you had two armies who both had shield walls. At the Battle of Fulford, both Hardrada's Vikings and Morcar Saxons formed up in shield walls and charged each other.
Go Vikings!
No Vikings. Bad Vikings.
Go Vikings!
Get out. The fighting was fierce and bloody and led on for many, many hours.
How many hours have we got?
Not enough.
Hurry up then!
Eventually, the lines split apart, no one having made any gains.
Oh,
I know. It was a draw, wasn't looking so great.
no dead.
No dead. However, the Vikings had a very, very special secret up their team. They're Luis Suarez, if you will.
Ooh.
The Viking line made to charge again.
Go Vikings!
No Vikings. When suddenly, out burst what the Vikings would call a berserker. This is a man who had absolutely no care for himself or his own well-being. You can see him here utilising an axe to just try and hammer his way through the opponent's line. Now the berserker has broken up the Viking line, splitting it into pieces.
Oh dear!
That did not look pleasant at all. But what's this?
Oh!
And there comes the same lack of care for his own health. He was so busy hitting the dead Saxon, he didn't even notice the living one behind him. The battle raged on for many hours, but at the end of the day, Vikings were much better single competitors than the Saxons were. And once the Saxon line broke, no Vikings. Once the Saxon line broke, they just started dropping like... It was absolutely...
Hooray! Sorry.
Disaster.
Yay!
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a very brief break. Really difficult to say. A very brief break from the action while my fighters take on... water that they desperately... I have to stand just here, otherwise it goes wrong. While my fighters take on the water that they so desperately need if they're going to be able to carry on. In time on a far out tradition, the dead shall again rise. My water bearers will go out to present the water to the fighters that need it. I have to stand here and fight. No, there it is. This is what comes of living in the past, guys. There it is. So, as I say, you can see here the Vikings using the round shield, which they were famed for. A round shield, a metre long, protecting you from knee to shoulder. In a formidable lineup, it would have defended every single man. Stood shoulder to shoulder to fight against their enemies. Now, the Vikings, having won at Fulford... Oh dear. The Vikings, having won at Fulford, really thought that they were pretty much set for the rest of England. They thought that they would have no opportunity to get defeated. They thought everything was gonna go fine. We'd all be Vikings. No, that'd be speaking Norwegian. So, the Vikings, having made their victory at Fulford, travelled down to a place called Stamford Bridge. No, not the football grounds, an actual bridge just outside of York. They travelled down to this place called Stamford Bridge, where they intended to control the river crossing, control York, and control the entirety of northern England. The problem was, the Saxons had a second army, under the control of the famed and great and noble leader Harold Godwinson, a truly brilliant man, under the control of Harold Godwinson.
He was a crook.
A brilliant man.
He was a crook.
Rightful King of England.
He was not the rightful King of England. He was
under the control of Harold Godwinson, rightful King of England.
Cheat.
The Saxon army marched up from London, collecting men as it went, as it was so numerous, the Vikings wouldn't have stood a chance even if they'd have known they were coming. The real problem was, of course, the Vikings had no idea the Saxons were coming.
They should have twittered.
Yeah, they should have done. They should have done. You're quite right. The Saxon line moved forward. You can see here the Saxons adopting a broad snout formation. The Vikings charged.
Go Vikings!
Attempting to break the Saxon line. Now bear in mind the Vikings here are without their armour, barely with their defences, because they had no idea they were about to come under attack. The Vikings charged and they fought hard, but at the end of the day, they weren't fresh. They'd just come out of a battle. They weren't armoured, even though the Saxons... many Saxons died in the attempt. Well, most of the Viking army on the wrong side of Stamford Bridge died. Now here there's a fairly famous story. If you go up to the village near Stamford Bridge, you'll find an inn known as the Lone Swordsman, or the Lone Axeman. The story goes that during the Battle of Stamford Bridge, one singular Viking stood on the bridge himself and blocked the entire Saxon army from crossing. You see here his
Go Vikings!
being tremendous, putting down Saxons left, right and centre. Every time the Saxons sent someone across to take him, he just beat them back and put them down. Astounding axe work here, as he comes in and just ends Saxon. Ow. Oh, that's going to hurt. Saxon after Saxon. He may have abandoned his axe. He was definitely incredible.
Oh, yes! Brilliant! Go Vikings! Viking!
The Saxon set forward a champion, intending to face the fierce Viking in single combat and decide the fate of England. The two men wielding their giant weapons. Okay! The two men wielding their rapidly steadily decreasing weapons, fought for hours and hours on end, battling one another as hard as they could, until neither man could go any longer. But the Vikings didn't realise that the Saxons had a very, very clever ruse.
I told you they were sneaky.
Clever.
Sneaky.
We're defending the Vikings in England. As the Viking defended himself and thought himself brilliant, a sneaky Saxon stuck up behind him.
I see, sneaky
the
Saxon.
Vicious monster. Yeah, sometimes you've got to be sneaky to defend what's just. Harold Godwinson was the just King of England. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another quick break while our fighters take on water, particularly the singular Viking who stood on the bridge. Can we get another round of applause for the Viking, by the way, please? That's a pretty difficult job. He performed blindingly. The dead shall rise. Please rise, take on water, do what you need to do. We're going to have a brief bit more discussion about the next thing. The awful thing, the bad thing.
The wonderful thing.
Terrible thing. Terrible. Do you want to tell them, Michelle, about the terrible thing?
The wonderful thing that happened, that made you and me what we are today. How the great William the Conqueror came over to defend his right to
Steal the crown.
against the sneaky Harold Godwin. He had been promised the throne of England. It was his, and Harold went back on it.
And the liar.
So he got all these people, and he got them on the ships, and when the weather was right, he made for England and landed near Hastings. And then he set his wonderful army up.
Terrible army.
Not quite on the beach, as they tend to make you believe, but
Nasty.
and there he waited for Harold. While Harold was off killing Vikings and making himself tired
Bending his crown.
and wasting time.
Taking his birthright.
But William and his wonderful army got themselves ready at battle, which is why it's called battle, and waited for Harold.
The Norman army the Norman army was quite unique at the time for its use of its dishonourable and cowardly use, I should say, of horses on the battlefield.
That's
Before then, hello? There we go. Before then, battles were fought by men, like men, on the ground, face to face. Of course, no one knew they could have win that way, so they assembled up on their horses. We don't actually...
good.
There's some suspension of disbelief here. You just imagine all of the Normans about 4 feet taller because they're on big horses. Right.
Go Normans! Go Normans!
Saxons lined up atop Senlac Ridge down the battle, having marched all the way down from Stamford Bridge at a forced march, practically a run down from York to the south coast. They covered the distance in what? 3 days, was it? 3 days?
Yeah.
That's a normal army of that far?
He was quite clever for a Saxon.
William Smith into 3 distinct ranks. He had fair enough.
I think we've lost the Saxons.
As you can see, we Saxons suffer from terrible bad luck. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that we're not very good. Awful bad luck. So William charged his lines in and attempted to break the Saxon line, but charging uphill into a strong shield wall, even on horses, it's just not possible to bust that line. After William retreated like a coward, ran away crying, suddenly a rumour started to spread through the ranks. It started out in the Normans, spread to the Saxons. Duke William had fallen. Duke William was dead. He removed a helmet. William's alive! Duke William had in fact not fallen, and having removed his helmet in the midst of battle with arrows flying, showed incredible bravery uncharacteristic of Normans. He charged his right flank in again. He charged his left in again. William was determined not to lose this battle. The Saxons were equally determined. And then everything suddenly changed. The right flank fled. The Saxons made chase. Oh, but it was a trick. A nasty, cheap little trick. The same happened throughout the army. On the left side, they retreated, pretending to flee, whereas in fact they were just dragging the Saxons off the hill to a killing ground. Eventually, slowly but surely, most of the Saxons there perished. A black day, an awful day, not just for the Saxons, but for England as a whole. It never was the same. You see, the Normans were an awful group of people. Truly, truly terrible. No love or caring there. You've got a lovely beard. Oh!
So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the Normans won. They gave you castles, the language, Magna Carta, and, as you can see, history is written by the victors. And if you would like to rewrite some history, come and see the Fire Isles at our pitch, and maybe join up, learn to sword fight, learn to cook, learn to make clothes. Ladies and gentlemen, the fighters of the Fire Isles.
Thank you very much.